hit record. Hi everyone, Jonathan here. Hope you guys are doing great. In this video, I'm going to be carrying out a very simple demonstration, a simple discussion on FastAPI file uploads. Now, file uploads in FastAPI are handled using two approaches, and those are the file function and the upload file class. I'm going to be talking about this, and at the end, I'll also show you a cool way in which you can work with file uploads using S3 locally. So to start, we're going to first of all look at what we have. I've created a very simple FastAPI app, and this is one that is making use of FastAPI new. So using FastAPI new, I was able to come up with this main.py file, and then I customized it or changed a few things so that it renders a template instead of returning the default hello world message. So right now, all I'm doing is to make use of Ginger tool to render a simple template, and I have this templates folder right here. It contains the index.html file that has the HTML I'm serving. If I take you to the browser, this is the HTML I'm serving. It just basically consists of a simple file upload as well as a submit button that says upload. That's all there is to it. If I take you back here, this basically is a form that handles the uploading. One important thing it has is the enc type of multi-part form data, and of course for you to carry out any form of file upload using FastAPI, you'll need to have this package called Python multipart. If you don't have it, then you will not be able to perform that. And since I installed a standard installation, of course my uv.loc will have that. So if I try to search for it, I will have it right here. So that's going to be what is installed in my project. So yeah, it comes as part of the standard installation. You need to install it in case you did not install FastAPI that way. So to start, we're now going to implement this upload endpoint called /upload. To do that, I'm going to first of all import the following from FastAPI. I'm going to import the file function, and I'm also going to import the upload file class from FastAPI. So let's create those two endpoints. The first one being the one for uploading a file. So let's just call it the /upload. And I think that's what we are using in our index.html. I'll say async def. Let's call this upload underscore file. My shift key is not working well. So if I say upload file 1, this will take in a file parameter. So this file parameter is going to be the bytes we get from the file as submitted from our form. So in this case, we shall call our function file, and this will return the bytes. So we can perform quite a lot of interesting things with this, but let's first create the other function. So I'm also going to have another function here, which I'm going to call /upload, and then upload2, and then I'll also rename the route handler to be upload2. Now, instead of this being a call to the file function, it's going to be an object of type upload file, because this is a class and it's not a function. Now, one other thing you may see in the FastAPI docs is that nowadays they use the annotated type. So rather than using this, can come right in here and say that our file is going to be of type annotated. So these will be bytes, and what these bytes will be the result of calling this function right here, which is our file function. So I have to import annotated here, which is not yet imported. So I'm going ahead and say from typing import annotated, and that's what we shall have. So yeah, those are our two route handlers. Now let's first of all implement the first route handler. This route handler is going to get a file and just basically return to us the bytes, so we can perform whatever I want to perform using the bytes or using the contents of that file. So let's start by using the inbuilt open function in Python, and we have to first of all give this file a name. So I'm going to create a variable here called file path. So that's going to be the path on our disk for this file, and then I'll call this file let me say file underscore, and then I'll use f strings. So I'll just basically give this a file with a UUID. So I'll say uuid.uuid4 and then .png. So let's say we are importing PNGs to this. I will go ahead and open the file path, and then I'll provide the mode in which I want to open this. So I'll say write bytes, and why I want to do that is because I want to write this on our system or write it on our disk. So I can say that I will get a result as a buffer object called f, and when I get this write buffer or buffer writer, I can then write that information or the bytes to it. So I can say something like f.write and then provide the bytes. So in this case, those are going to be the result of whatever we get from calling this function. According to its docs, it returns any, but if you dig deep in, you'll now realize that this actually returns bytes. So yeah, that's basically what we are working with. If I go ahead and try to work with this, I can just say return message upload successful. Now we can try to upload the file using this, which we actually have in our index.html. Now one thing to note is that the name attribute you give to your input has to be what you provide as the name of the parameter that's going to contain the bytes. So that's something to note. If we go back to our browser and try to upload the file, this time we shall see that our upload is successful. Now I made a mistake there, but forgive me for that. If I go back here, I'll have the file written in our root folder. So that's our file. Now we can also try to maybe make it be in a folder. So I can say upload slash the name of the file, and then I have to have that folder in existence. So if I say uploads, and then let me get rid of what we created at first. I move it to trash. If I go back to my browser and try to resend, now we have our uploads with that specific file uploaded. So yeah, our file upload works successfully. Now we can also perform things like basically getting the length of the file. So we can say file size. So that will be len. So let me use an f string here. I can say len and then file and then maybe bytes. So if I save that, if I go back here and try to maybe refresh, now see that contains 7588 bytes. So if I move back here, I'll see the file uploaded again, and that's exactly what we have right there. So using file can help you do simple file uploads where you can easily have that file loaded into your memory. But in case where you do not want to load the entire file in memory, that's where you can use the upload file class. Now when you look at the definition of that class, this contains quite a lot to it. It has a simple documentation here. So this is basically a file uploaded in a request. We can basically look into how it's created. So right in here, we can see that this contains a lot of attributes. And the first one is a file attribute. This provides for us a standard Python object, which is not async. So we can pretty much do whatever we can with a file object in Python. We get the file name, the file size, the headers, content type, and then methods like write, read, and so on. Now let's go ahead and try to work with that. If we were to do the same thing here, let me just copy the implementation of that first route handler and bring it to this function. So if we wanted to do what we have done with the first endpoint, what we can do in this case is to first read the contents of the file. Since this is not a byte object, Of course, we'll have to get its content by reading them from the object. So the way we're going to do that is by using the function called read, and this will read bytes from the file, but it will read some bytes. This means that we can read the file in chunks rather than loading the entire file into memory. So that's very important. And another thing to note is that this returns a coroutine type. So we have to await it. It's not, so upload file isn't something we can use in a sync route handler. So we can say await file.read, and then we'll have access to the bytes. That's what we need. Okay, so now that we've got the bytes, instead of calling file.writes and then providing the entire file object, this time we have to provide the file contents, and that will read or write the file. So yeah, if we need to get the file contents, this time we shall say file contents bytes, and then we can also maybe get access to the file name. So I can say file name, and then I provide file.name. So file, let me try to put this here or format it. So file.filename will give us the name of the file. So yeah, let's try to now use that. Now I'll have to go to index.html and change the action from upload to upload to, because that's the route handler I want to use in this case. If I go to main, I'm now going to go to our browser. I'll do a hard refresh and try to upload another file, and then I'll select. So if I upload this, I'll now see upload successful, the number of bytes the file has, and the file name or the original file name. So that's basically how our two functions work. We can do amazing things with upload file, including uploading multiple files. So how do we do that? All we have to just do is to specify that this is going to be a list of upload file objects. And once we do that, this will change from being an individual object to being a list of objects. So rather than performing this entire thing we've been doing here, we can actually just do a for, and then let me just say for f underscore in files, or let's say for file in files, and then we can simply push everything we have in here. So now I don't have to return the response for everything. I will just try to run the for loop. So I'll rename the file object to files, and then we shall loop over files, create a new file name, read the contents from an individual file, write that file to the disk, and then return this upload successful. Of course, there are better ways to handle this, but for now, all I'm doing is to just do this. Another thing you can do is to maybe try to try and then write your file like this. So you can try to write the file and maybe also finally close the file after writing to it. So in this case, you can do f.close so that you do not keep that object open. So yeah, if we try this, we can upload multiple files. So if we do that, we need to perform some changes on our index. So HTML, for example, I will have to go ahead and add a multiple attribute to our file. So I can say multiple, and then I'll also have to change the name of this to match what we have as our parameter. So in this case, I'll have to change to files. So those are the simple changes I need to work with upload file. If I go to our browser, which I've closed accidentally, I will go to localhost 8002, which is the endpoint on which this is running. If I look for one file and two files, can open and upload. So those will be uploaded, and yeah, they'll be put in our upload directory, just like you see right here. So the greatest trick the devil ever played, or the devil ever pulled, was making people believe LLMs are AI. So that's basically what the file is. So yeah, that's basically how you upload files in FastAPI. It's basically just getting the file or getting the bytes in the file and using them for what you want. Now let's get to the most interesting part of the video. I promise that I'll be showing you a very interesting way you can work with AWS file uploads on your local disk. That's where it's not multipass, it's MiniStack comes in. So MiniStack is an emulator for working with Amazon S3 services locally. So what they call it is an AWS emulator and a local stack alternative. Local stack is no longer free, so MiniStack is the alternative that provides this emulation for free, and it provides you some services, of course, and those are what you can test on your local host. So let's go to the docs and try to see how to set up S3. So to start here, you can see the architecture configuration, blah, blah, blah. What I'm interested in is all services. So what I want to do is to look into how to set up S3. So we can set up object storage with bucket scope, sub resources, policies, blah, blah, blah. Now this is what we need here, which is the quick start. So what I'm going to do is to perform the actions of a lazy dev and just simply copy paste that. I'll just create a new file here called setup.py, and I'll go to the docs, copy all the things we have in here and paste them in here. Now, of course, to use this service or to use MiniStack, we'll have to have a Boto3 installed. Boto3 is a library that allows us to work with AWS using Python. If I go to the Boto3 documentation, I can get access to more details about how to work with Boto3 or AWS. So Boto3 is the SDK that helps us to work with AWS and Python. So if we go ahead and pull up our terminal, stop our server, shall add that. So I'll say uv add Boto3. That will install Boto3 in our project. And once Boto3 has been installed, I'll then run our server again. Once I've done that, let's now look at what this code is. So this code right here is simple. It does import Boto3 and then create a Boto3 client. So when creating a Boto3 client, you first of all specify the service you want to use. And that's S3 for our case. And then the rest will be like configurations to the client. For example, our endpoint URL is going to be localhost 4566. Now I haven't yet set this up. I'm going to do that. So if I go to our documentation of MiniStack, we have a command we can use to set that up. If we go back here, we just have this docker run expose port 4566 and 4566, and then we run the image ministack org/ministack. So I'll copy this and run it in my terminal. I'll open up a new terminal here and paste in the command. So I'm on Linux, but I think it will work on Windows and any other container. Now I have this image and I have some containers running, so I'll have to first of all stop those, or try to stop the container that is running on that specific port. So I'll say docker, let me just remove the container, so no such container, or let me try to just basically run this on another port, maybe 4567. So that will start MiniStack on that port. Now one thing I'm seeing here is running MiniStack on 4556, which is interesting. Let me first stop this. So if I go to docker container ls, I see I have this MiniStack running. I think this was what was running at first. Let me stop it. Docker stop. And then I paste in the ID. So if I run, no container is running. So let me just maybe try to run the initial command. So that will start a new container with MiniStack. So you have to pull this if it doesn't exist yet on your machine. Okay, so in Docker, what I've done is to just basically run the container based on the image MiniStack org/MiniStack, and that will get us up and running. When you go back to our code right here, this client is looking at localhost 4556, which is the default port, as the endpoint URL. Now, for your case, that will be the endpoint URL for AWS if you are using AWS directly. The default region name will be US East 1, and then the access key ID can be anything. Normally, these are set up as environment variables, but since we are in demonstration, I'll just leave them to what they are currently. Now, the first thing we shall need to do, of course, is to create a bucket. Now, my bucket is not going to be called demo. I'll create this as file uploads, or let me just say demo file uploads. And let me also put this in a variable so that we do not confuse ourselves. So I'll just come right here, create one constant called bucket name, and then I will use that. So creating the bucket name or creating the bucket will be this. And then, yeah, I can even put this in a function where I can say function create underscore bucket is going to be one that just simply calls our create bucket function on main. Now, if you want to know what these functions are, they provide a full documentation of all these. If I take you back to the S3 setup, all these are operations and all these are functions you can call on your S3 client. Now, all those are documented on the Boto3 documentation, and you can pretty much go ahead and read more about them. But since we're going to be making use of S3, I'll only focus on those for S3. So if I get back here, now this is one for putting an object or adding an object to our bucket. I'll just simply create a function right here. I'll say add object, and this will basically add an object to add that to our bucket. So I'll just come right here, change this from demo to our bucket name, and then we shall provide the key. So the key in our case is going to be the file name, which will be a string, and then we shall also have the body or the contents of the file. So let me actually just say contents, and this will be in bytes, and then we shall just replace the key with the file name. Then we shall replace the body with the file contents. So that's basically how to call that function. And then we can pretty much try to get the object. Let's say, let's just actually also add this to our function. So I'll say def get object or get file. So I wonder why my shift key is not working. So get object, and then here we shall use our bucket name variable. So that will be our bucket name, and then the key here shall provide a file name, and then that will read the body, and then it will call .read. So yeah, now return this, and then maybe we shall just provide a file name, which will be a string. So that's our code. This function is going to create our bucket. This is going to add an object to our bucket, and this will help us to get a bucket or get an object in our bucket. So let's first of all run this as a script. At first, we'll need to create our bucket. So to create our bucket, I'll first of all stop our server, enlarge my terminal a little bit, and then I will call this as a script. So for now, we are not importing it, so I can do something like danda name equals danda main, and then I will say create bucket, and then yeah, if everything is set up well, if we run the AWS setup.py, in this case, it will go ahead and create our bucket. Now, how can we know that our bucket is created. To know if our bucket has been created, we can actually make use of a function here. So there are many functions here, but there's a list buckets function. Let me try to show you that list buckets function. So let's see how that works. If we try to maybe say print, let me comment this out and say s3 dot list underscore buckets. I'm sure that will go ahead and print all the information about all the buckets we've created in S3. And yeah, this is the JSON response we shall get. So it will contain multiple things, but what we are looking for is the name of our bucket. So let's see if we now have the name of the bucket. This is the buckets key right here, and this is the list of all available buckets. And now we see that this is our demo file uploads bucket. Nice. So we've created our bucket. Now let's go ahead and try to add a file from our FastAPI into the bucket. How are we going to do that? I'm going to comment this out, and then I'll import the add object function in our main.py. After doing that, I'll then just substitute these things into our code, and then we see how we shall upload our file. So go to main.py. I'll then go ahead and I'll copy this function name right here, add object, head over to main.py, and then I can come right here and say instead of writing the file to our disk with f.write, this time I am going to just come right here and add object. So this is something that's not present within this file. We'll have to import it from S3 setup. Now this requires us to have a file name. I can make use of the original file name. So I can say file name is going to be equal to, let's say file name is going to be equal to file.filename. And then I can also make use of the contents. So the contents of this file are going to be the file contents, which are the bytes of this file. So let me try to actually say content equals that. So file.filename is a string or none. That's why you see this typing error here, but I'll fix it by just adding that type ignore so that the static type checker just ignores it, because this of course is a string, but it can also be none if the file does not exist. Okay, so yeah, now we get rid of this, and we also get rid of file path. And instead of actually using this with, we can also just get rid of this entire context manager. That's if we are directly setting up the file. We can just basically use that. So let us try to upload files using our S3 setup with MiniStack. If I go to our simple application right here, I can do a hard refresh. Our server is not running. I need to restart it and run uv run FastAPI dev. So that will make our server run. If I come back here, do a hard refresh, try to get some files here, open, and then upload. So our upload is successful. We've successfully uploaded the files to S3 or MiniStack. Now let us try to see if these files are actually uploaded. To check that, we'll come right here, and then we'll try to go to AWS setup.py. Now I'm going to come right here, and then I'll try to print s3 dot. So we need to call that function for listing objects. So we have list buckets, we have list multi-part uploads, we have list objects. So list objects, I think, is what will list our objects. So let's try to see how that works. If we say dot list underscore objects, that function will list our objects. Let's try to see how that will run. So if I make this wide enough, stop our server, I'll run AWS setup.py. Now we are being told that this has to have the bucket option or the bucket parameter. So let me try to provide that. I'll say bucket, and then it's going to be bucket name, which is our bucket name we set up, demo file uploads. So if we try to run that, we now see this huge JSON payload. Now let me try to copy this, paste it, and try to see the individual files we have in here. And then I'll get some file here. Let me call this buckets. Oh, instead of actually trying to do that, let me just say that I want to get the outputs and then just redirect them to a file called files.json. That's a very nice thing we can do with the terminal. So if I come in here, files.json will have that huge payload that is going to contain our files. So these are all in single quotes, but of course JSON requires us to have double quotes. Now I'm going to Ctrl+Shift+L and I'll change this to double quotes. So let me get rid of those single quotes and make them double quotes, just like that. I think I've made a mistake, so let me just try to Ctrl+Shift+L and then turn those into double quotes. I think I still have an error because of these datetime things and stuff, but yeah, if we look at this closely, we have response metadata, and then we have truncated, we have key. So these are the individual objects. Let me try to see or show you what these are. So these are the contents. Contents are going to be the contents or the objects that are inside our bucket. So in here you can see admin assign.png as well as a hahaha.png. So those are the two files that we've basically put inside this. Those are the two files we've basically put inside our bucket. So that's basically how you can list your objects. Now, of course, there are very many things you can do with AWS S3, and this video is just a demo to show you how you can get up and running with S3. Let us put this in a function. So I'll say list files, and then yeah, let's say this is going to just list our files and then return that payload. So if you want to do something like that, then you have MiniStack as the way you can test your file uploads in case you want to just see how they will work locally before you put your files on AWS. I hope you've enjoyed this video and have had a great time watching this video. I'll make very in-depth videos about FastAPI, file uploads, and other topics. In fact, I'm working on the FastAPI Beyond CRUD course right now. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one. I'll try to provide you more content on AI and other topics. Thanks for watching, guys. Let's see ourselves in the next video. Bye.